Welcome to Jerry Recaps. The story continues. The tower system welcomed all the players upon entering. The white light faded as YuWon's vision returned to normal. Because of the string of messages he got, instead of checking the location he arrived in, YuWon first checked the rewards he obtained from his contribution points. He had racked up over 670,000 CP, and since he passed the tutorial in historic record time, he knew that there would be a reward fitting for it, but an unexpected and not even properly named egg was given to him. An egg? The reward was automatically placed into his inventory. When he put his hand inside his inventory, he felt an egg the size of a fist. What is this thing? YuWon thought he had obtained plenty of rewards, now that he was in possession of the Dark Divine Crystal. However, that didn't mean he had no expectations. "We're here," Hargan mumbled, as YuWon looked up. The unfathomably high ceiling was as high as the sky. Though this was only a single floor, the first floor was practically a world of its own. Around YuWon, there were tens of thousands of participants, people who had earned the title of players, around him. They had arrived in the outer tower region on the first floor. Known as the Meadow of Beginnings, this was the place where the players first stepped foot in the tower. And around the field. What the? Newbies already? Isn't there supposed to be quite a bit of time before the tutorial is over? No way. Are they already finished? Gazes descended upon the newly arrived players. It was the pre-existing players. They had been camping out, so they could welcome the new players that just cleared the tutorial and entered the tower. Many guilds had acted quickly to recruit new players, but they were caught off guard by their unexpectedly early arrival. Seeing some familiar faces, Hargan frowned. It seems like even Olympus is here this time. They're as busy as always. Some must have gone off somewhere though. Not everyone is here yet, said Hargan. Making contact with guilds would be pointless, so instead, he turned to YuWon. What about guilds? You don't have any intentions of joining? Hargan asked YuWon. No, I am not planning to join any, said YuWon. Not surprising. You don't even have any plans of forming a team, so why would you join a guild? Having expected this answer, Hargan shrugged his shoulders. Well, I'll keep my promise, since it's a no-brainer who earned more CP. Hargan was talking about granting him a favor since YuWon won. YuWon nodded in response. Though it was a verbal promise, Hargan wasn't the kind of guy to break a promise he made. Oh, and about earlier? Hargan asked while remembering the scene with the administrator. Your conversation with the administrator. Did something happen between Olympus and the administrator? It seemed that Hargan was concerned about what the administrator had said, which of course he was. The administrator had said he wanted to pull out Zeus's beard if he could, and Hargan had never heard of the administrator feeling so hostile to Olympus. YuWon stared at Hargan for some moments without saying a word. Then he walked over and said, The Olympus you know is probably a place that's righteous and uses its power to maintain order inside the tower. What are you trying to say? Said Hargan. If you want to know everyone's true colors, you should slowly uncover them yourself. You wouldn't believe me even if I told you. And with those words, YuWon walked away, following the signs. The Meadow of Beginnings had signs prepared for the new players. It pointed towards the direction of the first floor city, which was in the central region of the floor. When you get to town, first register as a player. That way we can at least stay in touch. Also, while watching YuWon walk away, Hargan hesitated before continuing, Be careful of jackals. After hearing those words, YuWon paused for a second, nodded his head, and waved his hand. Jackals, YuWon knew what Hargan meant. Even though he also hadn't joined a guild in his previous life, he had experienced them before. After YuWon had left, Hargan stood in place for a moment. There were people waiting for him. Hargan had locked eyes with some of the group members earlier, so he had wondered if they would come to greet him. Apparently, he guessed right. I, Agamemnon of Olympus, give my greetings to the one of great lineage. A man walked over to Hargan and spoke. He turned around to look at them. A group made its way through the new players. A man wearing gold-plated armor and a helmet led a group of about 10 or so players. The group wore capes with an emblem of a large mountain, a sword, and a spear, the symbol of Olympus. Agamemnon, you say? I think I've seen you before, said Hargan. Thank you for remembering me. Agamemnon got on one knee while facing Hargan. As a player who hadn't become a ranker yet, he had to show his respects according to Olympian lineage. But unlike his actions, Agamemnon looked at Hargan with indifference. Is Ares well? I heard he became a high ranker recently. Please pass along my congratulations, said Hargan. Thank you. The war maniac of Olympus, Ares. He was the player that Agamemnon followed. However, Lord Ares finds lineage more important than anything. He has ordered me to not pass along any of your messages until you find your birth mother, said the Golden Knight. Ares was renowned within Olympus for his bad personality, so it was given he would do this. What did you say? Hargan spoke while looking at him in a daze. As you know, the ruler of the skies has little interest in children. And, sir, you do not know who your mother is. Agamemnon kept on muttering such hateful words in front of Hargan. Hargan's veins were about to pop out. He could not bear it. You are disrespectful. Electricity started flowing out of Hargan's body. He tried to hold himself back, but his rage was already overflowing. Yet, in the midst of Hargan's anger, Agamemnon wore a stoic look, the look of someone who didn't know what they did wrong. In fact, it was possible that he was enjoying Hargan's rage. Do not be like this, sir. I'm sure you're well aware of Lord Ares's personality. Lineage is something you create. I hope you'll have your own family one day. Agamemnon shamelessly bent his head and put out the fire that he himself started. Hargan couldn't continue to show his anger after what Agamemnon said. It was true, the one that looked down on Hargan was Ares, not him. Not to mention the fact that Agamemnon was one of Ares's men. If he accidentally went too far, it might end up souring his own relationship with Olympus. All right. You guys may go. Hargan spoke and then turned around to leave. Yes, sir. Farewell. After bowing, Agamemnon suddenly remembered something and asked, Who was that man earlier? Seeing as how he left by himself, he doesn't seem to be one of your teammates. That guy? Hargan pressed his brow, recollecting YuWon, who had left first towards the city. He didn't quite know how to explain YuWon. Since he lost the bet and failed to recruit him into his team, he couldn't call him his companion. However, he couldn't say that it was just some guy he knew since they still had unfinished business. His relationship with YuWon. After thinking hard about it for a moment, Hargan slowly spoke. He is a friend? Maybe it's because he had finally said it once, and Hargan was able to say it again with more confidence. Yeah, he's something like a friend. Hargan's answer left Agamemnon in confusion. Jackals was a nickname given to them for the silly wolf masks that they wore. It referred to the guys that had given up on moving to the next floor and simply waited for the end of every tutorial. They were bastards that went after new players who weren't able to join any guilds in the Meadow of Beginnings, and their favorite prey were new players that went around alone, like YuWon. The Jackals called the period when the tutorial ended the time of harvest. Uninterested in guilds, YuWon avoided the existing players as he headed toward the city. I knew it. When he turned his head, he heard breathing in the tall grass. So they've started tailing me. He didn't even have to use cinder eyes. His high perception was enough for him to realize how many there were and where. The dark divine crystal that YuWon obtained from the last tutorial is a crystal that holds the darkness of the beginning. It contains an endless amount of mana with dark attributes. It also had an innate stealth ability. YuWon smiled faintly. He felt the fragment of the helm of invisibility inside his pocket. His opponents were small fry, so it was the perfect time to test it out. Why don't I try it out? The dark divine crystal started emitting black light from YuWon's hand. Jackals were a band that camped out on the first floor whenever the tutorial ended and went after new players. Even though they might have earned the qualifications to be players, they were still greenhorn kids that had just completed the tutorial and an easy target. The leader of the Jackals, Fateo, was extra interested in this round's harvest. To be over already. They were much faster than expected. It was only about 10 days since the tutorial started, and it was only a little over 5 days since the 5th tutorial had started. Yet the new players had already arrived. That was historically fast. That would mean that quite a few of them will have good items. And because they took so little time, they should be that much weaker. He's actually alone? And doesn't have any companions. Something feels off. Should we just let him go? The group of jackals started muttering among them. Why should we let him go? We just need to quickly take care of him. Can't you tell? That's a pyromancy robe. The leader spoke while pointing at YuWon. A pyromancy robe? Wow. We hit the jackpot. They whispered, watching YuWon. Though uninterested at first, after noticing the pyromancy robe, their expectations shot through the roof. While looking at his companions in the tall grass, Fateo's face suddenly froze. His companions were confused why their boss froze up. What's wrong? Where did he go? He disappeared. The guy that was walking down the road just a second ago had now disappeared. It was like the act of a ghost. They were sure he was just there. Suddenly, among the group of jackals that were hiding in the bushes, some of them had their heads cut off, which caused chaos everywhere. The sounds of sword slashes could be heard everywhere. Is it an enemy? The jackals drew their weapons, swords, spears, and bows. And one of them must have specialized in skills over weaponry because he pulled out a staff. But their preparations were for naught. Who are you? Come out! The jackals fell into chaos. They couldn't see their enemy. Boss! I think this must have been bait. The guy that was right before their eyes had disappeared. They couldn't believe it. In just a short moment, the people that were in the ambush apart from Fateo dropped dead one after another. They weren't far from him, so that meant that the enemy was already nearby. But he still could not detect any presence. There's no way a new player that just got to the first floor has a stealth skill. They thought that this was probably an illusion skill used by a different player to lure them out. No wonder a new player was wearing a pyromancy robe. It was too good to be true. Fateo turned his head, and though faint, he could see someone wearing a crimson robe. Could it be? Fateo concentrated mana in his eyes. Fateo ground his teeth. He had already heard 5 screams, and he was in a situation where the enemy's sword might pierce his neck at any moment. The skill that got him to his current position, Falcon's Eye, was activated. His vision got brighter, and he was able to see something faint. As the hazy figure swung his sword, Fateo could see the crimson dragon robe and the enemy's face. The enemy disappeared right away. The only moment that he revealed himself was in the short instance when he swung his sword. Fateo's eyes widened. The crimson dragon robe. The long sword. Though he couldn't see it clearly, Fateo was sure that this red flash was the new player that they had planned to rob. Another jackal lost their head, falling to the ground. Everyone, retreat. Run away! Fateo shouted as he ran full force into the forest. Fateo started stumbling back. He wasn't bait. Fateo realized he was wrong twice. This guy wasn't something like bait. He was a sword that was personally out to kill them. A warm sensation enveloped his feet, as Fateo's field of vision slowly tilted downwards. Fateo screamed in agony, his feet having been cut off. Having lost his feet to support him, he fell to the ground. Fateo tried to crawl forward with his arms. A sword pierced his hand. He looked back to the shadow that covered him. The hazy figure started becoming clearer until YuWon, wearing the pyromancy robe, became fully visible. Don't be annoying and go too far. You were going to get caught immediately anyway. YuWon pressed down on Fatao's neck with his hand. I'm going to ask you something. If you answer it earnestly, I'll at least send you off peacefully, said YuWon. This brat. Kill him. After hearing YuWon's words, Fatao quickly glanced around him. Just earlier he had a team of almost 20 people around him. They were jackals that had been hunting new players for over 10 years, but now all that remained were headless corpses. Who are you talking to? I get what you want, but you should have reasonable expectations of corpses. If you're going to keep acting like you're mute, I'll just continue on with what I was doing. YuWon pressed his neck so as to not let him shout and spoke. I'll talk. Fatao screamed from the agonizing pain of his body getting crushed. Then the force pressing down on him eased. YuWon kept his foot on Fatao as he proceeded to ask him questions. Do you know where the guy by the name of Muwuncheon is? Fatao was shaken by YuWon's question. How do you know this name? He couldn't continue his sentence. The sudden change in Fatao's expression made YuWon smirk. Wow. Jackpot on my first try. YuWon pressed down on Fatao with more force. YuWon was attacked by a few more jackal gangs after that, but every single confrontation ended similarly. After taking care of multiple jackal groups, YuWon finally arrived in the city. Countless players lived here. Using points as currency, they formed a society here. And within the city, YuWon went to a restaurant called Terra. He found food from the martial realm quite appetizing. At the terrace at the top of a building, Longjing tea was served to him. It wasn't a very expensive tea. You could find it in just about any cafe within the tower. This was the central region inside the first floor. Appreciating the fragrance, YuWon wore a smile of satisfaction. It had been a long time since he could enjoy such a leisurely time and view. This is something that's nice about having returned. After going all out, non-stop, he had slowly become fatigued. YuWon looked at the view from the 5th floor where the cafe was located. The city in the central region of the first floor was far bigger than Seoul. This world that operated with points as the currency looked quite peaceful and beautiful. He remembered the time when used to visit the cafe with Hercules and other high rankers. They spent a lot of quality time together in these sorts of cafes. The thought came to him that it was the right call to return. YuWon continued to drink his tea without thinking much more. And when he could see the bottom of his cup, he took out the fragment of the Helm of Invisibility from his pocket. Unlike the real Helm of Invisibility, it's not perfect at stealth. I wonder if it's because it's still unrefined, and I'm not skilled enough, thought YuWon. A fragment of the Helm of Invisibility. Its original name was the Dark Divine Crystal. It was a gem known to hold an infinite amount of power. The players from Earth would even jokingly call it an Infinity Stone. As such, it was an object that held tremendous amounts of mana. However, it was entirely up to the capability of the user to draw out and use that power. I'm not sure about the limits of its power, but I'll need to refine it first. The ruler of the underworld, Hades. The Helm of Invisibility was an item used by him, and it granted perfect stealth. YuWon had previously seen Hades in battle wearing the Helm of Invisibility. The reason why Zeus was able to claim the position as the ruler of the skies and become the king of Olympus was because he had obtained the fragment of the lightning bolt first. It was an object that allowed the current Olympus and the Olympus of the distant future to exist. Who could properly handle this? After finishing his tea, YuWon stood up. Break time was now over. I'll get to see Odyssey again, said YuWon. After finishing taking a break, YuWon registered as a player at the rankings registration office located at the center of the city. Player registration was a process where new players were given a number, a ranking, and a player kit. A player kit was a crystal that could be used by imbuing it with the user's mana. Because a mana's property was unique to each person like a fingerprint, once you registered your mana at the rankings registration office, you could pull up a player's number and information on the kit by using their mana. Was it here? YuWon scratched his head while walking around according to his memories. He thought he kinda knew where it was, and it did turn out that he only kinda knew. It was actually incredibly difficult to find the location just by knowing the general direction it was in. And I don't really have anyone I can ask. In the end, he had to search for it on foot. And so YuWon ended up in an alleyway on the outskirts of the city. Just a few points. Please. My child is starving. Mister. If the center of the city was the day, then this place was the night. There was a gathering of beggars, dropout players, and citizens that were born inside the tower. Give me everything you have. A beggar walked up to YuWon and pointed a knife at his back. But YuWon instantly turned around and smashed the man in his stomach and threw him away. Michael! Damn it! You punk! How dare you do this to our group? A man shouted. There were a total of 4 to 5 people. They started encircling YuWon. YuWon did not hesitate and beat them up one by one. Some of them had their limbs broken. If you really can't stand living like this, then go up the tower, said YuWon. The beggars cried in pain. But YuWon did not stop. He went ahead and broke an arm and a leg from each player that attacked him. He had no intention of showing pity. While YuWon was beating the beggars, a familiar sound of hammering came from an alleyway. YuWon let go of the arm of the player that had attacked him, so he could go find the source of this sound that he had been looking for. The sound grew louder. In the deepest depths of a back alleyway, there was a shabby blacksmith that radiated intense heat. So it was here. YuWon walked into the blacksmith's workshop. When he parted the curtains that were in place of a door, he felt a rush of even more intense heat. Is anyone here? YuWon asked loudly. The entrance was only slightly hot, while the inside of the workshop was like being steamed alive. The rhythmic beat of hammering steel. But soon, a different sound emerged. The sound of plunging hot steel into water. From the room where the hammering was coming from, a voice came out. Didn't you say you had to work in the morning? It was a thick, rough voice. YuWon waited for the owner of the voice to walk out. A moment later, from behind a firmly shut steel door, a blacksmith with a dark tan walked out. The man walked with a limp. Holding a heavy hammer, he looked at YuWon with curiosity. Huh? Who are you? After looking him up and down, the man was pleasantly surprised. YuWon looked entirely normal, unlike the thugs and beggars that roamed the alleys. Isn't that the pyromancy robe? You don't look like you're from around these parts. Are you lost? The man instantly recognized and commented on the pyromancy robe. It wasn't all that surprising. It was a fairly well-known item, and it cost way too much for a player on the first floor to wear. It was something you'd normally never see in a slum like this. No, I'm in the right place. Is this not a blacksmith's workshop? YuWon spoke while picking a sword. Are you sure? What? You want to buy some equipment? Said the blacksmith. After listening to YuWon, the man picked his ear as if he had lost interest. He then pointed at a wall with some cheap equipment. If you're fine with these, go ahead. Though I'm not sure if they'll be any better than what you have already. After hearing the man speak, YuWon started appraising the items on the wall one by one. YuWon's brows furrowed. It was a shabby sword. A sword so poorly made, the blade has no edge. It's more of a blunt weapon than a sword. The object was barely a sword, even having a pathetic description. A sword like this wouldn't even be able to cut an apple without imbuing mana into it. The apple would get smashed instead of sliced. They're all failures. The man frowned slightly at YuWon's brutally honest criticism. It might have been true, but he was talking about something he personally made. Who would be happy to hear their creation called a failure right to their face? It seems you're not that talented at breaking stuff. The blacksmith's expression shifted. He looked confused by what YuWon had said. YuWon looked away from the broken equipment and stared right at the man. Your name's Volcaro, right, Ajusi? The man was surprised by YuWon calling him with familiarity. He knew his name. That meant that it was no coincidence that YuWon had entered his workshop, which was deep inside a hard-to-navigate slum. Who sent you here? Volcaro tightened the grip on his hammer. Weak mana radiated around him. YuWon quickly reached into his pocket and pulled out a player kit. You don't have to be so wary. I'm a new player that just got to the first floor. A new player? Volcaro looked at the player kit in YuWon's hand. On the marble-like player kit, the number 1 was engraved into it. It signified the highest floor the player had conquered. The number 1. It wouldn't make sense if a player that managed to earn a pyromancy robe in the tutorial was unable to conquer the second floor. So you're telling the truth. Volcaro lowered his hammer back down. YuWon let out a sigh of relief. If their talk had gone sour and Volcaro had swung his hammer, a catastrophe might have occurred. Odyssey is as quick-tempered as always, thought YuWon. YuWon was surprised that he'd raised his hammer after simply being called Volcaro. If I had called him by his real name, he might have actually thrown it at me. YuWon thought while letting out a sigh of relief. YuWon decided he should pretend to be ignorant of the truth for a little while. But with this, he had managed to make him slightly lower his guard. Volcaro looked at YuWon with a gaze that was asking, "So what business do you have with me?" In response, YuWon showed his hand. "The reason why I came here wasn't to buy pre-made equipment but to commission you to make me an item." In YuWon's palm was a black crystal. The fragment of the helm of invisibility shone, letting out a black light. Volcaro was a talented blacksmith. No, talented couldn't even begin to describe him because he was the best blacksmith that YuWon knew. That's... Volcaro immediately recognized the crystal in YuWon's hand. Well, to be more precise, it wasn't that he recognized what the crystal was. Instead, he recognized its value. Could I take a closer look? YuWon nodded his head to Volcaro's question. Volcaro limped closer to YuWon. He looked at the fragment of the helm of invisibility up close, but since he had not been hired for a commission yet, he didn't reach for it. But it was more than enough for Volcaro to understand the full value of the fragment. It's an unrefined crystal. Are you able to refine it? Asked YuWon. I certainly can, but... Volcaro's voice trembled. YuWon studied his facial expression and the look in his eyes. He was hesitating. YuWon gave him time to think about it. After a long moment, Volcaro spoke. Where did you get this? YuWon handed the fragment over to Volcaro, and Volcaro ended up receiving it before he could say anything. I got it as the tutorial clear reward. As the tutorial clear reward? How did you receive something like this from? Volcaro spoke in a trembling voice. Confused, Volcaro pulled out his player kit and checked the date. It was the season for the tutorial, but there should still have been quite a bit of time before it was over and new players started roaming the central region. How many days did it take? Asked Volcaro. About 5 days and 2 hours. I was ranked first, said YuWon. That is a new record. Volcaro nodded after looking up and down YuWon's outfit. Volcaro knew that he wasn't just an ordinary guy, but for him to have placed first in the tutorial, while setting a historic record for the clear time. His doubts about where YuWon got the item disappeared, and his face showed clear resolve. The only thing I can do right now is refine it. YuWon didn't expect any more than that to begin with. He smiled wide and asked, Is it because you lack materials? Using any old cheap material will just harm it. You need a material that can handle the power of the crystal, said Volcaro. Volcaro looked around his workshop. It was full of old, crappy equipment. Are you sure you want to leave this to me? YuWon nodded while looking at the old man. You're crazy. Volcaro cackled. He firmly grasped the fragment of the helm of invisibility within his hand. You don't think I'd run away with this thing? Volcaro spoke while he walked towards his smithy. YuWon nodded his head without hesitation. It was Volcaro. Not to mention, there was no one else he could trust with this except him. Of course, I believe in you. I'm a pretty good judge of character. YuWon took a close look at Volcaro's eyes. If you wanted the crystal, I would see greed in your eyes, but instead, you look super excited. I also doubt your ability to destroy the item, since I have a good eye for them as well. YuWon spoke while grabbing a sword from the wall. He swung it around to analyze the sword. A dull edge. A lackluster handle. Everyone would say that this sword was a failure. It was such a poor product, it felt like the metal used to create it had been wasted. It was to a degree that one would believe that a normal player, not a blacksmith, created it. You can crush the edges, and you can make a lame handle, but habits die hard. YuWon lightly swung the sword around. It moved in a gentle line, and YuWon smiled softly. It seems you forgot to ruin the balance of the sword while making it. YuWon tested out a few more swords, spears, etc. This one, as well as that one. It was the same no matter how many weapons he handled. They all had a perfect weight distribution. Volcaro was stunned at YuWon's remarks. You really are something. Seeing YuWon's actions made Volcaro put his hand to his forehead while letting out a baffled laugh. He couldn't believe it. They were pieces of equipment Volcaro had hung up around the entrance to trick people. But instead of just ignoring them and passing by, YuWon had seen the true essence of the blacksmith that made them. Who are you? You seem like a pureblood. Who are you affiliated with? Volcaro continued to ask. I don't have anything like that. Pure blood, yeah, I am something similar. YuWon spoke while throwing the sword aside. You're either a pureblood or not. What do you mean, something similar? Volcaro looked down and let out a small laugh before looking back at YuWon. Fine. I'll accept the job. Since you trust me, I'll do the best refining there is. But I have a condition. Volcaro zipped his lips. You need to keep where you got this refined, as well as the fact that this object has been refined, a secret. You can do that, right? He was doing everything he could to stay hidden. It was truly a pity that a blacksmith of his caliber was rotting away in hiding. However, there was nothing YuWon could do about that right now. Of course. The only thing he could do was keep his promise. YuWon gave Volcaro his number and left. YuWon went and found an inn. YuWon slept for over half a day until the sun rose. After waking, YuWon went down to the restaurant on the first floor. It was a fairly large place. And after paying 3 points, breakfast was served. It was a pretty good spread. 10 days. It was longer than he had expected, but it wasn't an unbearably long time to wait. I gave Volcaro my number, so now I just have to wait. I had to remain on the first floor for a while anyways. 10 days is plenty of time, thought YuWon. YuWon picked up a piece of bread. The jackals will get together 4 days after the tutorial is over, so that'll be in 2 days. This was intel he gathered by asking the jackals he had captured. He had asked a few groups of jackals, and all their responses were the same. The time and location matched across the board. Now the real problem was the number of them. It'd be more convenient if I could catch and kill them all alone. YuWon went over his plans while chewing on his bread. But I'm unable to do that currently, thought YuWon. So you were here. YuWon looked at the man who sat down in the chair across from him. A man with wide shoulders and golden blonde hair stuck out no matter the place. It was Hargan. How did you find this place? Said YuWon. Hargan ordered his food and turned back to YuWon. It seemed he came without his companions. I searched all over for you. I asked around for the name of Kim YuWon, and this place came up. I got some connections. I ended up using some people, said Hargan. YuWon nodded his head in response to Hargan's answer. He should have guessed. Floor 1 was where Olympus displayed the greatest amount of influence, and at the end of the day, Hargan was the son of Zeus, the ruler of the skies. Something like finding someone staying at an inn was probably a piece of cake. You got a player kit, right? Give me your number. Hargan asked while taking out his own player kit. I never thought I'd end up getting hit on by a guy, said YuWon. I didn't know you had jokes. I thought you'd have a stale-ass personality, Hargan said in a sarcastic tone. I wouldn't say I'm exactly fun either, YuWon said while giving his number to Hargan. When they were done exchanging numbers, Hargan's food arrived. YuWon asked while taking a bite of his soup, "When are you planning on climbing up the tower?" "In about 5 days, I will climb up the tower," replied Hargan. YuWon further asked, "And what are you doing till then?" "I'm planning on leveling in the outer region. I also need to increase my team's teamwork. I'll need at least 5 days for that," replied Hargan. YuWon put down his spoon. "If that's the case, do a job with me," said YuWon. "A job?" Hargan was surprised by the unexpected proposal, mentioning a job out of nowhere. This was the first time YuWon had suggested something to him first. He came unannounced to get his number, yet here was YuWon asking for something out of the blue. "What kind of a job is it?" "The jackals. I want to exterminate them," said YuWon. Hargan's ears perked at where the talk was going. "You want to exterminate what?" "The jackals. They were the scourge of the first floor. It was unknown how many there were or if they were a structured organization. So exterminating them was considered impossible. Just sorting them out would be a problem in itself, but I don't think this is something that's possible to do with just 10 people," said Hargan. "Not 10. Just 2, you and me." While wiping his lips with a napkin, YuWon watched Hargan's shaken expression. "First, tell me more details," said Hargan. "It's a bit too early right now. Come back here tomorrow night. I'll tell you then. If you can't, I can do it alone," said YuWon. "Tomorrow night." Hargan nodded his head. He didn't finish his meal. There were far too many thoughts inside his head for him to continue shoving food in his mouth. Hargan got up from the table first. "All right. I'll see you then." "Going so soon?" asked YuWon. "I have a lot to take care of if I'm going to make time to meet you tomorrow night." Hargan waved his hand while speaking and left. Hargan seemed to have taken quite a liking to the team he had formed during the tutorial. Trying to grow that team so they could climb the tower together. He's really putting his heart into it. YuWon watched Hargan leave the restaurant. And then, "It seems like you've been waiting for a while." He looked back at the man sitting at the table behind him, who had been sitting with his back to YuWon. "Now that that's over, why don't you tell me what business you have with me?" I was quite surprised because Sir Hargan showed up out of nowhere. The man had been having a meal by himself and wore a hood. "This is our first time meeting each other, right?" "Nice to meet you." YuWon locked eyes with Agamemnon, who stood up from his seat. "I came from Olympus. Are you free for a quick talk?" Agamemnon sat down next to YuWon, smiling widely. It was kind of uncomfortable watching someone with a rough face like him forcefully smiling. Hargan is kin to the ruler of the skies. Shouldn't you have at least greeted him? YuWon stared at the coffee that Agamemnon ordered for him. Agamemnon shrugged in response. "I couldn't do to my objective." "Your objective?" YuWon was confused. "I came here to meet you," said Agamemnon. "You didn't have to spell that part out for me. So tell me, what do you want?" YuWon's straightforward question made Agamemnon pause before answering. YuWon, I heard that you ranked first in this tutorial. Also, Sir Hargan was only in second place. Agamemnon's words tipped YuWon off that he had looked into him. From what I heard, it seems that there was a dominating lead between first and second place. Everyone's saying right now that a monster entered the tower. Agamemnon explained the situation. "What an honest compliment." "Thanks for the kind words," replied YuWon. Agamemnon took a sip of his coffee. "Sir Hargan mentioned how you two are like friends." "Like friends? Isn't that a strange thing to say?" "A bit." YuWon did find it odd. "You were either friends or not friends." "Like friends," he says. It wasn't all that hard to figure out if you thought about it. YuWon and Hargan weren't friends yet. But Hargan said he and YuWon were like friends. That meant only one thing. So he wants to be friends. YuWon didn't know if he should like it or not. He presumed that, at least at first, Hargan only wanted him to join his team because of his skills, which was likely the right assumption. Now Hargan looked at YuWon favorably. This wasn't a bad thing for YuWon. Agamemnon continued speaking, and it seems that you haven't formed a team yet. That was a smart call. Connections you form during the tutorial don't last since most players don't become rankers. In fact, over half the players don't even attempt to climb the tower. Agamemnon looked at YuWon with a soft smile. However, you're different. You have the potential to ascend beyond a ranker and become a high ranker. So, don't you think you should climb the tower with people fit to accompany you? His voice was filled with pride. YuWon got the gist of what he was saying. Actually, YuWon knew what business Agamemnon had with him the moment he showed up. Join Olympus. Come under the graces of Lord Ares. We can prepare anything you want. YuWon guessed right. Agamemnon's goal was to recruit him into the guild. Olympus was, among the large guilds, the one that put the most effort into recruiting new players. YuWon smiled faintly. It was an interesting offer. Anything I want? Said YuWon. Yes. Lord Ares is different from a lowly being like Hargan, who doesn't even know his own mother. He is the son of Lady Hera and Lord Zeus, a great being that has already become a high ranker. Agamemnon reached his hand out to YuWon. If you grab this hand, you will become one of Olympus and Lord Ares' men. It will be far better than joining hands with him. Stop. YuWon finally reached for his coffee. He gulped the lukewarm coffee, chugging it in one go. Olympus was, among the large guilds, the one that put the most effort into recruiting new players. Thanks for the drink. I'll be going then. YuWon threw the cup on the table and stood up. What? Agamemnon was shocked by what YuWon said as he got up from his chair. Are you refusing an offer from Olympus? Agamemnon said in confusion. A snide smile and contempt filled Agamemnon's face as he stared at YuWon. Yeah, that's right. I even rejected the personal offer from Hargan, Zeus's son, because I don't have any plans of being associated anywhere. Said YuWon. What? Fit to accompany me? Doesn't know his own mother? Lowly being? And mutt? YuWon asked Agamemnon with a bit of a laugh, watching him stay in his seat. What about you, though? Zeus and Hera are Ares' parents, not yours. Agamemnon's face filled with rage, dripping with killing intent. If it weren't for the penalty of attacking a lower floor player, he might have already attacked YuWon. But YuWon was completely unfazed by Agamemnon's reaction. I only have one answer. As if he was finished, YuWon started walking away. I can't be seen with deviant lowlifes like you guys. After YuWon had left, one by one, the customers left until the restaurant was silent. To be more precise, the customers had fled from the anger and killing intent exuding from Agamemnon. At the center of the restaurant, he remained alone, stewing in his anger. A moment later. Are you okay, sir? Agamemnon's subordinates came to the restaurant looking for him. Agamemnon, who had been seated in place, trying to control his anger, slowly collected himself. How many jackals are we able to call on right now? He said in a rage. The jackals, sir? But they are. The subordinate shut up, unable to finish his sentence. It was because he noticed the look in Agamemnon's eyes. He knew because he had been serving him for a long time. If he ended up saying the wrong thing here, it could be his head. We will need a few days. Currently, the jackals are doing collections. They'll have to be finished with that before we're able to gather a significant number of them. The subordinate replied politely. Do we really need that much preparation in order to kill a single new player? Agamemnon spoke while slamming his fists on the table. Please think rationally about this, sir. He set a historic record for the tutorial. Do you really think a moderate number of jackals will do it? After hearing his subordinate's question, Agamemnon got lost in thought for a moment, nodding his head. Agamemnon could understand his subordinate's hesitation. However, then prepare about 100 men. His mind had been made up. Agamemnon ground his teeth, staring at the place YuWon had been sitting. When collections are over, kill Kim YuWon. So how are you planning on exterminating the jackals? 2 days later, Hargan met up with YuWon again at night. It wasn't difficult to meet now that they had exchanged their player numbers. There's a guy I have to meet. It took me a while to find where he lived. YuWon spoke while walking down the dark streets of the city. A guy you have to meet? Hargan followed YuWon, but he was still confused as to how they will tackle the jackals. It was quiet. Everyone was either closing shop or had already gone home for the day. Why are we in the marketplace? Just follow me. YuWon's eyes darted around the place as he walked. Hargan, who was walking beside YuWon, saw his eyes, recognizing that they had changed. Those eyes again, thought Hargan. They were crimson-colored, the same eyes YuWon had while fighting against Child, the Chimera creator. Scoundrel, are you kin of that monkey? That was Child's reaction when he saw YuWon's eyes. Though he said monkey in a degrading manner, Hargan immediately knew who that monkey was. Sun Ogong, the great sage, heaven's equal, thought Hargan. He was someone that had become a high ranker after less than 100 years since starting his ascent of the tower. But also, not only the great sage, heaven's equal, but he also has the same skill as Apollo, the fire skill. Many questions arose in Hargan's mind. What exactly was YuWon's ability? Who was he really? And was he associated somewhere? Is the reason why he won't join Olympus because… Hargan's steps came to a halt while watching YuWon walk ahead of him. He remembered one of the skills YuWon had used. Gigantification. It was a skill that blessed you with the power of the giants. And it was a skill that only Hercules, the giant slayer, held within Olympus. However, it was a skill that all the giants possessed. If YuWon was a giant, and if that was the reason why he wasn't joining Olympus. As Hargan's train of thought continued. YuWon suddenly stopped in front of a shop and called out to Hargan. It was a general store that sold all sorts of goods. Make sure you respond properly, said YuWon. We're going in. Hargan followed YuWon into the store that had most of its lights off, as if it was preparing to close for the day. Hey, owner. YuWon called out while opening the door. Someone came outside from YuWon's call. It was a young man with a gentle face, wearing white clothes, his hair tied back. Oh, I'm sorry. We're closed for the day. The baby-faced young man approached them with a warm response. But if there is something you're looking for, please leave me your name and number, and I'll contact you tomorrow. The young man pulled out a pen and notepad from his pocket. The inside of the store was silent for a moment before YuWon spoke. Muwuncheon, YuWon said while narrowing his eyes. I'm looking for a guy named Muwuncheon. The young man's expression was shaken. What the hell? The young man shouted and turned around to quickly ran for the back door. Where do you think you're going? YuWon shouted while running after the young man. YuWon grabbed the back of the young man's, Muwuncheon's, neck. While getting pulled back, Wuncheon swung his hand. The small knife that was in his hand grazed YuWon's cheek. YuWon's cinder eyes flashed with a hint of anger on his face. Wuncheon's body was slammed into the floor, denting the ground and shaking the whole store. Wuncheon wiggled around, trying to escape YuWon's grasp. But the only thing he could do was struggle. There was no way to escape YuWon's hold. How is he so strong? He was being pushed down with excessive force. However, what terrified him the most was that if YuWon squeezed just a bit harder, his bones could be crushed. This all happened in an instant. Hargan was confused about what was going on, so he asked YuWon, "What are you doing?" This is the guy. Alias Cheon Namwoon. His real name is Mu Wuncheon. He's a player from the martial realm that gave up on climbing the tower, YuWon said while looking down at Wuncheon. This guy's the king of the jackals. YuWon restrained Wuncheon with a durable rope. Though he might have been a first-floor player, he was still quite skilled. So YuWon had purchased a pretty durable rope from the shop for this occasion. Wuncheon lowered his head as he grunted. He guessed that it must have been a pretty expensive rope because no matter how much mana he used to power up, it did not give. Watching Wuncheon, YuWon raised his hand. Don't look away. I know exactly what you're thinking. Why are you doing this to me? You got the wrong person. I swear, said Wuncheon. Then why did you try to run earlier? That's because you had such a scary look in your eyes. I thought things might turn out like this. Wuncheon trailed off as he lowered his head. He had a pure, innocent face, and he looked as if he was about to cry from being falsely accused. With a confused look on his face, Hargan looked back and forth between the tied-up Wuncheon and YuWon. Hold up. Hargan called YuWon to come to the back. Once YuWon had gotten close enough to him, he whispered a question. Are you sure this is the guy you were looking for? How can you be so sure? He really could have run because he was spooked. Saying that he's the king of the jackals just from that is. YuWon picked up and waved the small dagger that was sticking up from the floor. It was the weapon Wuncheon had thrown at YuWon. Does this look like a normal knife? Look closely at the floor. Hargan checked the place the dagger had been. At first, he didn't think anything was odd, but upon closer inspection, he found something strange. It's melted. Hargan originally thought that the knife had gotten impaled on the floor, but that was wrong. When the knife fell, it melted the marble until it looked like it had been impaled in it. And now that he thought about it, unless it was some real master-grade sword, it'd be weird for a knife to be impaled in marble so deeply just by falling on it. This is a pretty potent poison. It's something that players on the upper floors would use, not a first-floor player. A lethal poison from the upper floors. It was a substance that was illegal to use on fellow players. Not only did it require permission from the Bureau to possess, but it was also incredibly hard to obtain it. Do you really think the owner of a general store would own something like this? Always hidden in his sleeves, no less? There were definitely a few oddities. Where did the information leak from? A random voice said. Actually, it was Wuncheon's voice, but his voice had become scratchier, and his manner of speech sounded much more foreign. And it wasn't just his voice. Wuncheon's face slowly started morphing. On the kind-looking young man's face, wrinkles started appearing, and his eyes started looking much hazier. It was as if he had suddenly aged. Hargan now fully believed YuWon. This guy was Wuncheon, the king of the jackals. How did you discover my identity? And more importantly, how did you learn my name? Said the king of jackals. I wonder. How did I find out? YuWon smiled back in response to Wuncheon's question, mockingly responding to his question with a question. This made Wuncheon grind his teeth and glare at YuWon. You apparently have no fear. Do you not know who's backing me? Wuncheon's eyes turned to Hargan, and he was shocked. That hair and eye color. Golden yellow hair and eyes. It was an uncommon appearance. Hargan? YuWon lightly hit Hargan's side from an angle that Wuncheon couldn't see. Hargan tried to gauge YuWon's action, and then he remembered what he had told him before coming in here. Make sure you respond properly. Respond. Hargan wondered, is this what YuWon meant? Hargan raised his hand up high. And in a second, electricity started gathering in his hand. An electric attack, which radiated intense heat, formed in Hargan's hand. After witnessing that, Wuncheon started mumbling. So it's true. There was rage in Wuncheon's voice. Did Olympus betray us? What? Hargan was surprised by the unexpected question. Saying you were betrayed. That's kind of harsh. YuWon responded as if his feelings were actually hurt. Hargan turned his head and stared at YuWon. Meanwhile, YuWon walked towards Wuncheon in order to hide the look on Hargan's face. We simply have a favor we want to ask. A favor? Wuncheon said in a daze. You're currently following Agamemnon's orders, right? That's right. So? Wuncheon's answer made Hargen's expression turn sour. Agamemnon? Hargen wondered why that bastard had a connection to jackals. The confusion was hard for Hargen to shake off. But before he could snap out of it, YuWon continued on. For a little while now, the ruler of the skies seems to have an interest in the matters of the first floor. Yeah. And right on cue, his son has just finished the tutorial. Wuncheon, who had a bitter face from thinking he was betrayed, now looked like he was filled with hope and expectations. How much longer do you plan on acting as Agamemnon's dog here on the first floor? He doesn't even serve one of the big three, but a greenhorn that just became a high ranker. If all this goes well, the ruler of the skies will start personally looking after you jackals. And if you continue to do well, you guys might even obtain an important role in Olympus. Wuncheon looked old. The ruler of the skies had taken an interest in him. It was a far bigger deal than receiving orders from just Agamemnon, one of Ares' lackeys. The ruler of the skies. The king of Olympus. Zeus. Being in his good graces would mean that he would have nothing to fear in this tower. Wuncheon nodded his head, having forged his resolve. What is the favor, sir? Wuncheon started speaking more humbly. It was as if he fully trusted YuWon's words, which was inevitable. He'd been following Olympus's orders up till now, and after seeing Hargen's electric attack, there was no way he wouldn't believe YuWon. How many jackals are there? Asked YuWon. There are about 1,000 of them. Wuncheon replied calmly. Gather them all by tomorrow night. Here's the location. Have them all there by midnight. YuWon took out a folded piece of paper from his pocket and tossed it to him. Don't let Agamemnon or any of the guys on Ares' side know. You can do that, right? Wuncheon nodded his head aggressively. YuWon tapped Hargen's shoulder before turning around. Let's go. Hargen's expression was quite sour. He could not understand the whole situation even a bit. Hargen and YuWon promptly left the store together, and Hargen started growling at YuWon. You sure are good at name-dropping someone else's father. He turned his head and saw that Hargen was genuinely pissed. It was honestly wonder how he managed to hold his anger back. Explain yourself, and don't leave a single detail out. His voice sounded like a growling beast. Because of how furious he was, a bit of electricity flowed out of Hargen's body. If he actually exploded in anger, this whole area would probably be blown to smithereens. YuWon fully turned around and looked Hargen directly in the eyes. He could tell that Hargen was angry, but he wasn't the target of his anger. He did a good job holding it back. YuWon knew that it was probably hard for him to hold back after Olympus was mentioned. He was a more patient guy than YuWon had first assumed. It's as you heard. You're telling me that Olympus is working together with the jackals? You honestly expect me to believe that? Hargen's body was trembling with anger. And what if you don't believe it? Said YuWon. There's no way. He must just be selling out Olympus's name. Olympus's, Hargen kept on muttering. Hargen. YuWon stopped Hargen. I don't know what kind of place you think Olympus is, but you need to take off your rose-tinted glasses and take a look at the true face of Olympus. YuWon turned around and started walking away. And like that, Hargen was alone. He felt dazed. Just thinking about how much more work I have now because of those bastards makes me want to go pull out Zeus's beard right now. The relationship between Olympus and the tutorial's administrator had soured. He had asked YuWon, but he avoided giving him an answer. Did Olympus betray us? He remembered how the king of the jackals mentioned Olympus's betrayal. It was something he would never have said if they didn't have some sort of connection, to begin with. Hargen's head ached, and he thought back to something YuWon had said. The Olympus you know is probably a place that's righteous and uses its power to maintain order inside the tower. Hargen stood in place for a long time, dazed. His faith had been shaken. Time passed, and 2 days later, as the light from the ceiling faded, night set in. Hargen came to the promised location, looking for YuWon. He hadn't been able to reach him, so he was worried YuWon might not show up, but he was standing right on the outskirts of the central city, waiting for Hargan. If you were any later, I was going to leave without you. Hargan had arrived with 1 minute to spare before the set time. He had cut it a little short, but he did show up in the end. Have you finished thinking it through? I was born and raised in Olympus. Hargan started going on a tangent. Olympus was my home and family. And my father was my hero. Of course, that'd be the case. Hargan had spent his entire life growing up in Olympus, and it had been less than a month since he was selected by the tower to climb it. I don't have a lot of memories with my mother. I actually can't even really remember her face, but I remember her voice and something she told me. My son, don't forget the pride of Olympus. Hargan trailed off, but from what he said, YuWon could tell what Olympus meant to him. To Hargan, Olympus was more than just a guild. Olympus was pride in itself. I took my time thinking it through, Hargan said, closing his eyes. If this was the right thing to do, or if I'd be betraying Olympus. All the thoughts he'd had over the past day rushed through Hargan's mind. And your conclusion is? Hargan reopened his eyes after hearing YuWon's question. Whether you are right or wrong, the jackals need to be exterminated since they are the parasites of the first floor. YuWon smiled faintly as Hargan continued talking. And if that's an embarrassing secret of Olympus. Hargan's eyes no longer looked shaken. I'll cut them out with my own hands. In a large cave, under a huge mountain, torches could be seen everywhere to lighten up the cave. Thousands of jackals could be seen gathered inside the cave. Wow! There was a place like this? It is really big. It's damp and humid, and there's a weird smell. It was supposedly home to a lizardmen tribe, though it's been a while since it was cleared out. A bunch of people had gathered inside during the day. They were all players wearing white jackal masks, people who made a living by hunting first-floor players. Jackals consisted of a network of small gangs, which meant that their presence was dispersed. Gathering together would defeat the purpose of their organizational structure, so it couldn't be helped that this was the first time they had all come together. The jackals' chit-chat suddenly died down. It was because of one jackal that had just arrived at the cave. Are all of you here? It was a jackal wearing a red mask, the king of the jackals. YuWon had appeared. When the jackal captains got down on one knee and bowed their heads, the others followed suit. It was a sight to behold, 1,000 jackals bowing to one person. YuWon smiled proudly behind his mask. Everyone now rise. Having enjoyed the greeting, YuWon signaled the jackals to stand up with his hands. And then the crowd started getting noisy. The jackals who had never seen YuWon before asked each of their captains. The captains responded by simply nodding their heads. So it really is him. He's never shown himself before, so why now? I heard he has a really big shot backing him. The cave had become noisy with chatter, and veins started bulging on YuWon's forehead. He didn't like this atmosphere. Whoever opens their mouth from this point, I will cut off their head. YuWon pulled out the sword that was hanging from his waist. Even inside the dimly lit cave, YuWon's sword shone brightly. The moonlight sword. It was an item far too pricey for any first-floor player to be wielding, but that weapon was in the hands of the king of jackals right now. The jackals quieted down. The captains also unsheathed their weapons and aimed them at the jackals that were chattering, and the cave became dead silent in an instant. YuWon lowered his sword before continuing. We have a mission to fulfill now. After the small commotion ended, YuWon continued speaking. I don't know what the mission is. It will be a difficult one since it requires all of us, but I can tell you one thing for sure. YuWon clenched both of his hands and raised them up above his head. After today, we jackals will ascend to the sky. The jackals cheered at the short speech. Some were just going along with the crowd, but YuWon still smiled proudly. I shall introduce them to you. YuWon pointed towards the entrance of the cave. Our backers. Two people entered the cave. They were both wearing the same red jackal mask as Wuncheon, which was the symbol of the king of the jackals. It was Hargan and YuWon. Thank you for coming all the way here. Wuncheon bowed toward the two, and then handed them a thick envelope. A small token for you. What is it? YuWon reached out and took the envelope. Opening and inspecting the contents, he saw that there was a bundle of paper with 1,000 written on them. They were papers that had a special pattern engraved on them with a skill. It's Asgardian currency, sir. Each bill is worth 1,000 points, and it's the result of the collections this time around. Asgard had created a unique currency of its own. They were purchasable with points and usable like real monetary bills. And since it was backed by Asgard, they were guaranteed their worth. And this is everything from the collections? YuWon asked. Yes, sir. That's everything. The king of jackals replied cautiously. Hargan took a look inside the envelope after hearing Wuncheon's explanation. Seeing the amount, YuWon was sure that it was almost, if not all, of the money that the jackals had made this time around. He knew that Agamemnon must have been waiting desperately for this money, so handing it over to him meant that Wuncheon had resolved to fully join YuWon's side. Thanks for the gift, YuWon replied, as if it wasn't a big deal, putting the envelope inside his inventory. YuWon looked over the 1,000 jackals that had gathered inside the cave. There was truly no other gang like them. They packed the cave full. While looking at them, YuWon smiled underneath his mask. Well then. YuWon's hand slowly came up, and hot mana gathered at the tip of YuWon's fingers. It's time to say goodbye. YuWon lightly snapped his fingers. He used the skill of colossal fire. Starting right in front of YuWon, a massive fire started spreading across the cave. Fire! What is this? The fire spread instantly. Red flames filled the cave in just moments, and a sharp-smelling smoke arose. Shocked, Wuncheon quickly put some distance between him and the duo. The cave descended into chaos. Could this be? Wuncheon thought back to the water that was covering the floor of the cave. He had assumed that the cave was just damp, but that wasn't the case. The water-like liquid on the ground was helping the fire spread even faster instead of putting it out. It wasn't water but oil. But why didn't it smell? Wuncheon wondered. Oil had a distinct smell. And then an item came to mind. The scentless powder. Wuncheon realized it. That item was capable of hiding the scent of the oil inside this cave. And it is a cave, it wasn't out of place for the floor to be wet. Wuncheon looked back and forth between the jackals that were burning alive and the duo. Everything had happened so quickly, he couldn't process what was happening. What in the world is going on? Wuncheon's eyes filled with rage. What do you think you're doing? What do you mean, what we're doing? YuWon took off his mask and tossed it aside. We're cleaning up. YuWon broke the mask with ease by stomping on it. Following YuWon, Hargan also took off and tossed aside the stuffy mask. The two finally uncovered their faces, and Wuncheon finally understood that their goal wasn't to cooperate with them. You guys. You're not from Olympus. Wrong. I am from Olympus. Hargan responded after punching away another jackal. Then why? Because you guys are an embarrassment to Olympus. Hargan firmly planted his feet at the entrance of the cave. And I'm going to cut you guys off with my very own hands. YuWon also cut down the jackals that ran towards him without any hesitation. He had no intention of letting a single one of them leave there alive, to begin with. What are you all doing? Wuncheon shouted, pointing at YuWon and Hargan. Kill these bastards. Open a way already. Wuncheon shouted at the top of his lungs. The nearby jackals ran for the exit in an attempt to survive, but Hargan's hands moved in reaction. The jackals that had tried to escape were knocked back. YuWon and Hargan stood in front of the exit to stop them from getting out. The entrance to the cave was the exit. There was no other escape route. That meant in order to escape from the fire, the jackals had to get past Hargan and YuWon to live. Damn it. Hyun took out his player kit in a hurry. There was only a single person that came to mind right now. Agamemnon. I have to contact him right away. However, the message could not be delivered. Why? Hyun shouted while attempting to resend the message over and over again, asking for help, for Agamemnon to come to his location as fast as possible. Why isn't it working? He kept shouting. A player kit is an object that sends a message by using the mana stored inside it. YuWon said, laughing at Hyun's struggles so pathetically. Did you really think the player kit would work properly in the midst of a shitshow like this? The player kit delivered messages by organizing mana into text. So the way to disable a player kit was quite simple. One just had to flood the surrounding area with mana, which was exactly what was happening. The fire skill created a wall of mana around the cave, so any mana message ended up disintegrating, unable to make it past the wall. As time went on, the fire got hotter instead of dying down. Over half the jackals had already burned to death. And before they realized it, the fire had gotten awfully close to Hyun. Being out of options, Hyun unsheathed his sword. In order to survive, he had to fight. Hyun ran forward while concentrating mana around his feet. He aimed for YuWon's side while he was distracted by taking down a jackal. YuWon was already aware of his presence. YuWon turned his head and the two locked eyes. His eyes were crimson. Hyun's body was stuck in place. He could not move. I can't move. For a second, Hyun's body was petrified, as he had turned to stone. Swinging his sword upward, YuWon sliced Hyun's body in half in one go, cutting from his crotch to his head. A red line appeared across Hyun's body. His head rang, and he could no longer think. It was as if time froze. Everything felt slow. And before he lost consciousness, locking eyes with YuWon, he was able to hear the very last words of his life. I'll put the money you gave me to good use. The cave eventually collapsed from the fire. YuWon and Hyun, who had been protecting the exit, ran outside in a hurry, getting far away from the cave. Hyun, who had been fighting with everything he had for hours, let out a deep breath before flopping down onto the ground. Luckily, YuWon saw no injuries on Hyun. Despite the long battle, it seemed like he had only run out of mana and wasn't too worn out. Are you okay? Do you think I would be? Hyun replied, looking up at YuWon. Unlike him, YuWon didn't look tired at all. He still looked fully geared to go. Hyun noted how YuWon didn't only have great skills, but also incredible stamina. Are you okay? We killed 1,000 people. YuWon looked down at Hyun, who was sitting on the ground. At first, YuWon thought that he had sat down because he was tired, but it turned out that it was from guilt. This is probably the first time he's killed this many people, thought YuWon. Hyun had never experienced war, so obviously he wasn't used to killing people, even bastards who deserved to die, like the jackals. YuWon nodded his head to Hyun's question. I'm okay. How can you be so nonchalant? Murder, kidnapping, robbery, and slavery. Those were the primary ways the jackals made money, said YuWon. I can save dozens, even hundreds, of people by killing one of them. Why should I hesitate in taking them down? Still, Hyun tried to speak but got interrupted by YuWon as he said, It might be more convenient for you if you wallow in half-baked guilt. Hyun bit and closed his lips from YuWon's words. He looked as if he was hit on the head. After staying still, dazed, Hyun shook his head and got up from his spot. I learned something from this event. You have a sharper tongue than your looks suggest, and you're pretty smart to boot. Is that supposed to be a compliment? Replied YuWon. Yeah, it is. YuWon looked at Hyun, who was now smirking. YuWon had thought this before, but Hyun had great mental fortitude. The guy was filled with guilt and regret until just a second ago, and now he was looking better after just a short exchange. You really are a just guy. perfect for living an exhausting life. YuWon complimented Hargan to calm him down. Well, you didn't seem like a kind person, but turns out you're different from how you look. Even though you had nothing to gain, you went ahead and took care of the jackals. That wasn't an easy thing to do. It was the same during the tutorial. You seem to always act with a much bigger picture in mind than me. The way Hargan looked at YuWon had changed. From when I was young, I was told that that's called a great cause. A great cause. It was something quite embarrassing to hear. After hearing that, YuWon burst out into laughter. You're wrong about one thing. I don't know what you meant by there was nothing to gain. YuWon shook a thick paper envelope in his hand. Just look at how much there was to gain. Hargan's eyes widened after seeing the envelope. He had completely forgotten about it. Inside the envelope were the points the jackals had made from selling items stolen from the most recent tutorial on the black market. You want to split it? You did help out, said YuWon. Hargan lowered his head, grunting at the difficult decision. He then slowly looked up at the envelope in YuWon's hand. Give me some, Hargan mumbled quietly. That's what I thought. After seeing YuWon's smirk, Hargan lowered his head even further. The points that the jackals had collected were gathered by killing and robbing new players. Though there were no owners to return the money to, Hargan couldn't take it with a clear conscience. While opening the envelope to count the money, YuWon paused. Oh, I have something I want to ask you. You were second to me, right? In the tutorial. Hargan titled his head, curious why YuWon was asking him this. After a momentary pause, YuWon asked him, what was the reward? On the other side, why? The corner of the table broke off. All the food and drinks fell to the floor, and in an instant, the restaurant became dead silent. After slamming his fist down because he couldn't hold back his anger, Agamemnon lowered his voice before asking, why can't I contact him? He was at a pub late at night, and what he was about to talk about was something that he couldn't discuss while yelling at the top of his lungs in public. I'm not sure either. I definitely tried contacting them, but... The subordinate trembled while answering. Did Wooncheon go crazy or something since we sent him a message? I'm sure we'll get a response soon, sir. Agamemnon bit his lip while starting to raise his voice again. He somehow managed to rein his anger in before asking his subordinates with eyes full of fury, when exactly that is going to be. Unless he's really gone off the deep end, there's no way that bastard would have run off with our money. After growling, Agamemnon poured himself another drink. A few hours passed. Sir Agamemnon. One of Agamemnon's men rushed inside the pub in a hurry. From his subordinate's reaction, Agamemnon's face brightened. He thought that maybe they had managed to find Wooncheon. Did you find him? We did, but... The subordinate gave him a weird response. Agamemnon quickly expelled the buzz by evoking his mana. His subordinate tried to dodge his gaze as he pulled out his player kit. And on the player kit, it showed an image of a collapsed cave and a pile of burnt corpses. What is all this? There. Jackals? Jackals? All of them? It was a huge number. Agamemnon estimated close to 1,000 of them. It matched Olympus's estimate of their group's size, which meant that almost all, if not all, of the jackals had been gathered there. Then Wooncheon as well. He's probably among them, his subordinate replied. Agamemnon's switch was flipped. He had to gather all his will to hold back his anger. What about the collection of money? His subordinate gave no response. Finally, Agamemnon let out a scream at the top of his lungs. After returning to the inn, YuWon opened the envelope and checked the collection money one more time. There were a whopping 384 bills, and this was after he had split half with Hargan. They did quite a number. 380,000 points was an amount that only some rankers ever got to see. If he used this money, he'd be able to buy a set of equipment on par with a ranker. Well, I don't have to worry about food or shelter anymore. YuWon put the envelope back in his inventory. He desperately wanted to run to the Asgardian Merchants Guild right away and exchange this for points. However, that ran the risk of Olympus learning that YuWon was the one who had exterminated the jackals. And YuWon didn't want to get caught up in something so complicated quite yet on the first floor. With this money, I'll be able to buy the core materials needed to make the item that'll hold the dark divine crystal, but I still don't have enough to buy the materials for the fine detailing. YuWon couldn't hold back his smile at the mountain of points he had amassed. Still, I might be able to finish the production of the item sooner than I expected. The dark divine crystal was currently the highest-ranking item YuWon possessed. As an item that symbolized the big three gods of Olympus, it was one of the strongest items that YuWon knew to exist. Though it was currently only capable of stealth and changing the attribute of the mana. The fragment of the Helm of Invisibility's true power isn't either of those. YuWon knew that the fragment was currently slowly taking shape to show its true worth under the greatest blacksmith within the tower. The problem is, while laying down on the bed, YuWon put his hand inside his inventory and pulled out an egg the size of a fist. It was pure white with an irregular purple pattern. It's an unknown egg. There is no way to know whose egg it is, what will come out of the egg, or how to make it hatch. And it had a 0% incubation rate. It was truly a puzzling item. I can't figure out what this item's for. There were quite a few items with unclear descriptions. They were typically incomplete items, but that's because they were only half-made. Even YuWon, who had a myriad of different magical experiences within the tower, had never seen an item in the form of an egg with this kind of description before. This egg is a reward from the tutorial, and it's a reward for having achieved the highest record ever. YuWon rolled it in his hands while observing it. Hargan got the king's lightning glove. It's a pretty advanced item used by rankers. Using that as a reference, this can't be a normal item. It had to be an item that was comparable to the Dark Divine Crystal. And considering that the Dark Divine Crystal was given for defeating the Chimera Creator, this egg was likely to be an even better item since it was a reward for achieving over 670,000 CP during the tutorial. But I just can't figure it out. YuWon scratched his head in confusion. It was only the size of a fist, and it was an egg of an unknown creature with an irregular purple pattern. The pattern. YuWon jolted up from his bed. He felt a faint warmth from the egg, and now that he thought about it, this pattern wasn't there when he had first checked the egg. His head ached. A nightmare-like memory, one he didn't wish to remember, came to his mind. But now that he had remembered it, the memory sped through his thoughts like a high-resolution video. It was an event from the not-so-long-ago past. But it was also an event potentially far in the future. That was when YuWon had seen an irregular pattern like this. YuWon's eyes morphed to a crimson color as he stared at the egg in the palm of his hand. An outer god. When YuWon mumbled those words, "You! What are you?" the egg spoke to him. YuWon went to Volcaro's workshop after a few days. For the next few days, the mysterious egg continued to occupy his thoughts. Is it really the symbol of an outer god? YuWon couldn't sense anything. He started thinking maybe it was his imagination. There's no way to be certain yet. Would the thing that hatches from this egg be a valuable companion that helps YuWon? Or would it bring destruction and ruin like the outer gods in his memories? YuWon shook his head. He was thinking too much. Most creatures that hatched from eggs recognized the being that was with them the longest during incubation and the one they saw for the first time after they hatched as their mother. That's why some rankers went through the trouble of obtaining the eggs of mythical beasts to have them as companions. If they raised them right, a mythical beast could become a powerful ally. If I can properly hatch and raise this egg. YuWon stopped his train of thought, shaking his head. Let's stop dwelling on it. Overthinking things was taboo. Right now, he had to focus on the object in front of him. YuWon entered Volcaro's workshop. I'm here. Wait just a minute. Volcaro didn't even bother turning his head to see his guest. He put the crystal in a fire and started refining it with a knife. The crystal slowly started changing shape after it was blasted with intense heat. It must be unbelievably hard. Volcaro carried on with the refinement. Some amount of time passed. Volcaro stretched his back before submerging the fragment in water. The hot fragment instantly evaporated dozens of liters of water, filling the workshop with steam. So you're here. Volcaro wiped the beads of sweat on his forehead with a towel as he walked over to YuWon. I have something to ask you. The two sat down on wooden chairs facing each other. What type of weapons and armor do you use? If you use a sword, what type of sword is it? Is it long and thick? What kind of armor do you prefer? How light or heavy? Asked Volcaro. Why do you ask? YuWon was curious about why Volcaro was asking about different stuff. I ended up with byproducts from the crystal, Volcaro answered as he pulled out a small bottle with black powder held inside. I want to try making something with this. Powder that came from refining the dark divine crystal. There wasn't a lot of it, but its value couldn't be underestimated. As the dark divine crystal held such great powers, this powder was more valuable than most crystals. YuWon had no reason to refuse an item made from the crystal's byproduct. Hades' scythe was made from the powder that came out while refining the fragment, but don't you need other materials? It wasn't easy to obtain materials that could support the power of the dark divine crystal. And knowing Volcaro's personality, he wouldn't want to use this kind of material to make some half-assed item. I don't have any materials like adamantium, but I do have something similar. Since it's not the refined crystal, mithril should be enough to handle the powder. Volcaro got up quickly from his chair, knocking it over. He then walked over and grabbed rebar off the wall. It should have been pretty hot from the heat inside the workshop, but Volcaro held it unfazed. It's about 1.8 kilograms. It's not that much, but it's enough to make equipment by mixing it. Mithril wasn't that hard of material, but it was a rare mineral that possessed great mana conductivity, and depending on how it was crafted, it could even gain mana resistance. 1.8 kilograms of mithril. That should fetch quite a price. YuWon currently had over 100,000 points, but that was nowhere near enough for 1.8 kilograms. At the very least, he'd have to pay 300,000 points. I could pay for it if I exchanged the Asgardian bills for points, but counting the points that YuWon took from the jackals, he currently possessed a total of 500,000 points. However, there was no way for him to currently exchange that many Asgardian bills for points. I guess I can only buy a third of it. While YuWon was weighing his options, you can give me the money later. I'll put it on your tab. Volcaro spoke. You'll put it on my tab? It was a shocking offer. He was offering to put hundreds of thousands of points worth of mithril on a tab for a new player that had just arrived on the first floor. And what if I end up running away without paying? It's my greed as a craftsman that makes me want to create a proper item with this. I'm offering this to you because I'm impatient. So if you end up taking the item and running away without paying, I won't hold a grudge against you. Spoke Volcaro. If you really want to get technical about it, the item that you left me with is dozens of times more valuable than this mithril. Actually, you can't even quantify the value of this item with points. Unsurprisingly, Volcaro knew the true worth of the dark divine crystal. And that's also why he had decided to trust YuWon with his mithril. You trusted me for some reason, so it's only fair I do the same. To put 300,000 points on a tab on a whim. YuWon had to hold back his grin. Volcaro was still exactly as he remembered. Look over there and pick some equipment. If there's something you like, I'll start production based on it. YuWon gave out a soft smile at Volcaro's words. YuWon instantly pulled out a sword from his inventory and held it in front of Volcaro. I need a sword. He spoke while handing it to Volcaro. The weight doesn't matter. As long as it's not so heavy that I can't wield it, I'll get used to it quickly. As for the shape and length, this is an adequate size. A sword, you say? Volcaro carefully inspected the sword YuWon handed him. It was the well-sharpened sword YuWon had purchased in the tutorial. It was a simple, no-frills sword that wasn't very difficult to make. Volcaro smiled widely with a confident expression. That's actually my specialty. It was the first time he had smiled after meeting YuWon. A week later in the Olympus Guild house located in the center of the city. In the large yard of the house, Agamemnon was putting on his heavy, silver-tinted armor. His subordinates helped secure it in place, and brought him his sword. Agamemnon looked back at his men and smiled. To think this kind of opportunity would come to me. A few days ago, he had been in despair, having learned that the jackals had been completely exterminated. He was about to completely lose his position within Olympus and get demoted to being an ordinary player. Thankfully, the will of the tower hadn't abandoned him. No, instead it had presented him with an opportunity, similar to how players who made it through difficult trials were given great powers. Is everyone here? Yes, sir. We have gathered up all our players between the 1st and 10th floors, said the subordinate. Agamemnon nodded his head to his subordinate's reply. What about reinforcements? Taking the administrator's intervention and the tower's restrictions into account, a suitable reinforcement has just arrived, his subordinate replied. Agamemnon hung the sword on his waist and went out. There were hundreds of players gathered outside, waiting for his order to depart. Agamemnon mounted his horse and braced himself to set out. Let's go. Today we will be arresting Olympus criminal. Olympus's army of hundreds of players, including Agamemnon, set out for their mission. That's all for today. If you like the next part of this manhwa, just comment below. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to like, subscribe and comment for getting epic content on this channel. See you next time.